Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is an original tag video. I'm so excited. So I've been doing a number of tag videos and I watch a lot of tag videos, and one thing that I really love in a good tag video is the opportunity to look at and think about books that that don't get a lot of mention maybe on BookTube. And so I created this tag for that reason. I wanted to highlight some of the books that we own that don't get talked about very much. And I had a lot of fun coming up with the prompts for this tag. My husband Aaron and I brainstormed to come up with these 10 questions. And so yeah, they were really just about an opportunity of browsing through the shelves and looking for those books that we love that just don't get talked about maybe as often on BookTube. And so I've called this the Buried Treasure Tag, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to tag a whole bunch of people because I'd like to get it started, and I'm really curious to see what other people's answers are. So let's get right into the questions. Question number 1, or prompt number 1. A book that has been on your shelf a long time, but you have never talked about on your channel. And I am going to go with What Angels Fear by C.S. Harris. This book came out in 2005, and it's the start of a long-running series that I really love. This is a historical mystery series. This first one is set in 1811. And so I think that that's Regency, Georgian, I'm not entirely sure, but I love that time period. And so the main character in these books, oh yeah, George III of England. So the main character in this book is Sebastian St. Cyr. He is the Viscount Devlin. He is a brilliant young nobleman shattered by his experience in the Napoleonic Wars. And in this book, the threat of revolution haunts the upper classes of King George III's England. Then a beautiful young woman is found raped and savagely murdered on the altar steps of an ancient church near Westminster Abbey. A dueling pistol discovered at the scene and the damning testimony of a witness both point to one man, Sebastian St. Cyr. Viscount Devlin, a brilliant young nobleman shattered by his experience in the Napoleonic Wars. Now a fugitive running for his life, Sebastian calls upon his skill as an agent during the war to catch the killer and prove his own innocence. In the process, he accumulates a band of unlikely allies, including the enigmatic beauty Cat Boleyn, who broke Sebastian's heart years ago. In Sebastian's world of intrigue and espionage, nothing is as it seems, yet the truth may hold the key to the future of the British monarchy, as well as to Sebastian's own salvation. So I love this book, but I also really enjoy this series. I really enjoy the characters in this series. They're great mysteries, great writing, very atmospheric. So yeah, the answer to this first prompt is What Angels Fear by C.S. Harris. The second prompt, a book with a cover so awful it's actually awesome. Now I hunted through my shelves here because I really wanted to find a great cover that is just so terrible that it actually is great. And the reason why I love this prompt is because it's so subjective. And so it'll really highlight people's preferences in covers. So I have two here, and because I couldn't decide, so it's going to have to be a tie. Both of these are Agatha Christie's, and I'm going to guess that both of them are by the same cover artist. This first one here is Peril at End House. This cover is so awful, it's awesome. So you've got this house at the back with the birds, which is fine, but then right at the front you've got this girl with this bat on her face for some reason. Yeah, it's just terrible. And then this is Elephants Can Remember, and it's again just so awful, it's awesome. So yeah, those are my picks for prompt number 2. Prompt number 3, a book you love that you wish everyone would read. And I tried to find something else, but I had to admit in the end that the book that I want everyone to read that I love is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. She wrote this in 1926, and it is so far my favorite Agatha Christie. I love it, and I want everyone to read it. Prompt number 4. A well-known author's underappreciated work. So what I wanted here is for people to look through their shelves for an author that they enjoy that a lot of people know about, but to find something from that author that is underappreciated, that's not talked about very much. And so for this one, I had to go with Marion Chesney's Edwardian Murder Mystery series. There's only 4 in this series, and I'm going to tell you why this is an underappreciated work. MC Beaton is super famous for her Hamish Macbeth and her Agatha Raisin long-running series. She started both of those series in the 90s, but before that, she was famous for Regency romances, which she wrote under her own name, which is Marion Chesney. And in 2003, I think 2003 is when she first wrote the first one in this series, Snobbery with Violence. She wrote it under the name Marion Chesney, which I find very interesting because she had already chose to use a pen name, N.C. Beaton, to write the Hamish Macbeth and the Agatha Raisins. So to separate her mystery work from her Regency romance work. So when she wrote a set of historical mysteries, she chose Marion Chesney instead of MC Beaton, which I find fascinating. Anyway, I think this is an underappreciated series of hers. So there's only 4 of them. They are set in Edwardian times, and the main character is Lady Rose Summer, and she is a debutante at the time. And so the 4 books in the series are Snobbery with Violence, Hasty Death, Sick of Shadows, and Our Lady of Pain. Alright, prompt number 5. The oldest edition of a book on your shelves. And for this, I had to go with, we've got a series, I'm going to show them all to you. This is The Works of Alexander Dumas. This has been in my husband's family for generations. And we received them a couple years ago from his uncle, who received them, we believe, from his dad, who received them, I think, from his dad. But these were published in these editions were 1893 by Peter Fenelon Collier. And they are fantastic. So they've got great illustrations. Here's the inside. Great illustrations. This one is The Countess de Charnay, a sequel to Taking the Bastille, and The Chevalier de Maison Rouge, A Tale of the Reign of Terror, which is a sequel to The Countess de Charnay. And they all say, copiously illustrated with elegant pen and ink and wood engravings, specially drawn for this edition by eminent French and American artists. So the works of Alexander Dumas are complete in 9 volumes, and this is the 9th volume. And we have all 9, so it's a complete set. So I'm going to show them all to you because they are so cool. So this one is, some of them are getting to be in a little bit rough shape, but they're not bad actually. Volume 8, The Queen's Necklace, a sequel to Memoirs of a Physician, and Taking the Bastille, or 6 years later, the sequel to A Queen's Necklace. So that's volume 8. We're going backwards here for some reason, I don't know why. This one is volume 7, The Memoirs of a Physician and historical romance. And then volume 6 is The 45 Guardsmen, a sequel to Chico the Chester, The Conspirators, or The Chevalier de Harmontel, and The Regent's Daughter, a sequel to The Conspirators, with another great illustration. There are also illustrations throughout. Let me see if I can find you one here. All right. Oh, did you see the cloud of dust kick up when I closed that? Awesome. All right, and this is Marguerite de Valois, a historical romance, and Chico the Chester, the sequel to Marguerite de Valois. And this is, of course, volume 5 now. Volume 4. The Vicomte de Bragelonne, or 10 Years Later, being the completion of The Three Musketeers and 20 Years After, Part 2. For some reason, this one did not have a illustration in the front, so let's find one here for you. Oh, here we go. And volume 3, The Vicomte de Bragelonne, or 10 Years Later, being the completion of The Three Musketeers and 20 Years After, Part 1. Do you want to bet that this is going to be The Three Musketeers? I think it is. The Three Musketeers, being the first of the D'Artagnan romances, and 20 Years After, the sequel to The Three Musketeers. And volume number 1, if you are familiar with the works of Alexander Dumas, do you want to take a guess of what this is going to be before I tell you? It is The Count of Monte Cristo, or The Adventures of Edmond Dantes. So yeah, this is the oldest edition on our shelves, and yeah, I am very happy to have these. I think these are just a really cool edition of the works of Alexander Dumas. Okay, prompt number 6. An author on your shelves that you have never heard anyone else talk about. Sorry, there's dust flinging through the air. That we've never heard anyone else talk about, primarily here on BookTube, I'm thinking. So again, I had 2 for this. And so I've got John Greenwood, and this is the first in his Mr. Mosley series, Murder, Mr. Mosley. And this series was written in the 80s, and I've never heard anyone talk about these. This first one is from 1983. But I love these. Mr. Mosley is a great character. These books are humorous. And so he's just this village copper, basically. Welcome home to murder. After 17 years, Brenda Thwaites Cryer returns to Parsons Fold with a shadowy past and a shadowy fortune. Now she lay dead in Jackman's cottage, and the only possible witness, her invalid mother, is missing. For Inspector Mosley, this case is a radical departure from locating missing turkeys or thwarting orange thieves. But HQ has no one else available. No one but whiz-kid Sergeant Beamish, whose task it becomes to keep a close eye on unpredictable Mosley. Yet how could Beamish fulfill his duty when Mosley dispatches him on ridiculous research missions from a Yorkshire castle to a prestigious law firm to a dentist in Ember Bay? only to discover Mosley poking about on the scene when he arrives. For Beamish, it is infuriating until these haphazard leads net important clues that help quietly ingenious Mosley bag his very first killer. So John Greenwood, the Mosley books. And then Joan Aiken. Joan Aiken wrote a bunch of children's books, but she also wrote a series of sequels to Jane Austen's works, which are pretty good. I'm actually just reading Jane Fairfax now, where she retells the story of Emma, but through the eyes of Jane Fairfax. But this is the one that I wanted to highlight. This is The Haunting of Lamb House. She wrote this in 91, and one of the reasons why I love this book so much is because it's set in Rye, and I find Rye a fascinating village in England. It's on the south coast in England. Joan Aiken was born there, and my husband and I visited Rye when we were in England a number of years ago, and I loved it. It is such a great place to visit. So The Haunting of Lamb House. A disturbed alien presence may sometimes be sensed in the gracious Georgian building or outside in its exquisite half-acre of walled garden. E.F. Benson actually saw the ghost. Henry James felt it. Or why, as soon as he moved in, should he write The Turn of the Screw? This is the story of what might have happened to cause the haunting, told in 3 parts. The imagined life of Tony Lamb, whose father built the house that now stands at the top of Mermaid Street, Rye, and episodes that occurred, or easily might have occurred, during the occupancy of 2 famous literary tenants who later played their part in the building's history. Each ghostly tale takes on the particular flavor of its main participant, that of Henry James, all hints and shades, E.F. Benson, visited by a more robust and swinging scepter, and Tony Lamb's own tale of a small 18th century tragedy, whose griefs and frustrations will reach forward to haunt, shadow, and perplex the later arrivals. How will they respond to his messages? The restless ghost pleads for some service to be performed, but what? Who was the dark stranger that E.F. Benson encountered in the garden? What agency set the fire that nearly destroyed Henry James's study? Joan Aiken, born in Rye, a stone's throw from Lamb House, has written a combination of ghost story, biography, and fantasy, a deeply felt personal book full of literary echoes. So E.F. Benson, if you are unfamiliar, is the guy who wrote the Map and Lucia books, which are hilarious and awesome, and I love them. And so yeah, The Haunting of Lamb House is a great book that blends fact with fiction, and so if you like a good ghost story, this might be one for you. Prompt number 7. A book you love from your shelves that you haven't read in over 5 years. For that, I chose Blind Justice by Bruce Alexander. This is the first in a series about Sir John Fielding. He founded the Bow Street Runners, and he was a magistrate at the Bow Street Court in London. And this is a series of mysteries about him and 13-year-old Jeremy Proctor. I'm just going to read the back. In 1768, 13-year-old Jeremy Proctor arrived in London. The city streets, bustling with gamblers, prostitutes, and thieves, were certainly no place for a boy on his own, and trouble wasted no time in finding the lad. He was falsely charged with theft and arrested. Jeremy was saved only by the wisdom and compassion of Sir John Fielding. Fielding was a man of great reputation, and for good reason. He had founded the Bow Street Runners, a police force that had reduced nighttime crime in London. He was just as any magistrate in England, and Sir John was universally renowned for his skills as a detective. Most impressively, he had accomplished all of this without the sense of sight. But there was nothing lacking in his sense of justice, and after clearing Jeremy of the charges, Sir John and his new helper began a career of solving some of London's most wicked crimes. So Blind Justice, this was published in 1994. Prompt number 8. A book you remember reading in your childhood. And I found this on the shelves, and so I thought this will be the one I highlight. This is Travels in a Donkey Trap. My mom gave this to me, I was probably in grade 5 or 6 maybe, by Daisy Baker. One of the reasons Mom gave this to me, I think, was because it was published in 1974, which is the year that I was born. Yeah. And so you can see on the inside here, it has got my childish name. I wrote up here, Janelle Dibben, in my purple pen that I loved when I was in grade 5 or 6. So, Travels in a Donkey Trap by Daisy Baker. This is a book about Daisy Baker. There's a picture of her and her donkey. So yeah, she, somewhere among the deep banked lanes of Devon, an elderly lady rides by herself in a gay blue and red trap drawn by a small brown donkey. The donkey pauses to crop the grass under the hedges. The woman scarcely wakes from her daydream. They are in no hurry. They are content. For Daisy Baker, the acquisition of a donkey and trap at the age of 76 was a revelation. When Darky came, she says, a whole new world opened up. So I found myself writing this book to express it all. The donkey not only freed her from the confinement of 4 walls in the country cottage in which she had begun to see herself spending an increasingly cramped old age, but because she moved so immutably at the pace of another era, she gave her at the same time another kind of freedom. It had something to do with leisure, something to do with the timelessness of her surroundings. Daisy Baker calls it the freedom of the universe. I now had a whole inner world to illuminate the outer in whatever circumstances I might happen to be. So she was born in 1894 in Shoreditch in London, but bred in the country where her father was a milk roundsman. She went from elementary school into domestic service, married in 1921, later moved back to her beloved countryside again. Now a widow, she lives with her daughter and son-in-law in North Devon, together with her donkey, several goats, 6 cats, and a rabbit. All right, and prompt number 9, a book you love from a genre you don't tend to read from. And for that, I chose The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I love this book. This is the 2nd volume, The Two Towers. And I'm rereading this for the Lord of the Read-Along, which is hosted by Krista from Books and Gems. And I love The Lord of the Rings. It is an epic story with huge themes, and I love it, but it's fantasy, and I don't read fantasy. This is probably one of the only fantasy books that I've ever read, so it is definitely a book from a genre that I do not tend to read. And then finally, prompt number 10 is to tag a booktuber who has great buried treasure in their videos. And so I'm going to tag a whole bunch. If you do this video, please feel free to just tag one person or however many that you want. I wanted to get the word out and sort of see if I can get this tag around. And so I'm going to tag a whole bunch of people. So I'm going to tag Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. The buried treasure in her videos, she does a Turkish word of the day for every video, and I love that. I think that's so fantastic. So I'm tagging you, Berna. Catherine with Tea with Catherine, she does this tea and mystery series where she drinks tea and she talks about mysteries, and I love them. I think that's great. Gunpowder, Fiction, and Plot. The buried treasure in these videos are the interaction between the two. It's a husband and wife, and I love the interaction between those two. So you guys, I'm tagging you. Jennifer Brooks, I love the buried treasure that I love in her videos is when she talks about history. I love that, and I think that's fantastic. The Bookish Bryants, I'm tagging them for the variety that they bring, because both of them are talking about the books that they love, and they both have very different preferences and likes in their books, so it brings a great variety to their conversation on BookTube. Jane Catherine on books, I love her videos, and she does this series on cozy crime. This was a little while ago, and that's why it counts as buried treasure. So you have to go delve into her channel to find her cozy crime series. Those are really fun. Krista over at Books and Gems, She does great weekend vlogs, and she started these a while ago. So again, buried treasure, her weekend vlogs where she talks about reading, but she also just takes you along in her life, and I find them really very fun. The redhead is reading. She does a series called Mystery History Talks, which I love. They're fantastic. And so I'm tagging you. Kate Howe. I find her super creative, and so if you delve into her videos, you will find videos from a while ago where she does just super creative things with her videos. So definitely Buried Treasure, although that has continued, she still is super creative in her channel. Lil's Vintage World. She has this classic crime book review series, which I love. It's so great. And then The Hungry Bookworm. She did an Agatha Christie original tag, which is super fantastic. And even though I've never been tagged in it, I'm totally going to do it anyway. So that's who I'm tagging for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for another video soon. Bye.